Brooks stood motionless before the small white casket in the hushed funeral home, her black dress clinging to her frame as silent tears carved paths down her cheeks, smudging the carefully applied makeup that barely concealed the angry red burn scars on her right cheek, ear, and arm from the fire that had devoured her world just days earlier on May 10th, 2024. The polished mahogany surfaces and soft lighting created an almost serene atmosphere, yet nothing could soothe the raw, gaping wound in her soul as she gazed at 2-year-old Lena's peaceful face, dressed in her favorite pink lace-trimmed dress, her short blonde hair neatly arranged, those big brown eyes now closed forever, eyes that had once sparkled with innocent wonder during grocery trips where Lena proudly pushed her miniature shopping cart, placing apples and cereal boxes with triumphant giggles that still echoed in Ellie's memory like ghosts refusing to fade. The dates on the framed photo below the image, March 15th, 2022 to May 10th, 2024, mocked her with their brevity, a mere 2 years of life snatched away in what Ellie was certain was her own catastrophic negligence. She had replayed the morning endlessly, grocery shopping with Lena babbling happily in the car seat about a sticker from the cashier, arriving home, watching her independent toddler scamper inside while Ellie unloaded bags, only to hear screams turn from playful impatience to pure terror. As thick black smoke billowed and flames leaped from the kitchen where Lena had run ahead. Historical context deepens this tragedy. House fires caused by gas leaks or faulty appliances have claimed thousands of young lives annually in the United States since the post-World War II suburban boom of the 1950s, when natural gas became widespread for home heating and cooking, leading to safety campaigns by the National Fire Protection Association (NFPA) that highlighted outdated fire extinguishers and the dangers of leaving toddlers unsupervised even for moments, much like the real 1980s. 2020's statistics showing child fire deaths often linked to parental distraction or equipment failure, echoing cases documented in NFPA reports where single parents faced compounded guilt amid economic pressures. Ellie had frozen in shock upon opening the door, precious seconds ticking by as her brain refused to process the inferno, then frantically dialing emergency services while choking on smoke, discovering her fire extinguisher outdated with its pressure gauge in the red zone, an all-too common oversight in busy households juggling work and childcare. As Modern Relevance shows in 2020's data from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission urging annual checks on safety equipment amid rising single-parent households post-pandemic. Vivid character moments paint her anguish, dropping grocery bags to rush inside, calling Lena's name hoarsely until firefighters restrained her on the lawn as neighbors gathered with blankets, her own burns blistering while Lena was carried out soot-blackened and limp, surviving only until the next morning when the heart monitor flatlined despite doctors' efforts, leaving Ellie clutching her tiny hand and begging her to wake. Emotionally, Ellie spiraled into profound self-blame, internalizing every if only she had responded faster to the first cry instead of assuming a tantrum, if only she had kept safety gear accessible, if only she had been more vigilant as a mother. Mirroring the philosophical teaching of survivor's guilt articulated by psychologists like those studying Holocaust survivors or modern disaster victims, where the mind constructs narratives of personal fault to regain illusory control over chaos, a concept rooted in ancient Stoic ideas from Epictetus that we torment ourselves not by events, but by our judgments of them. Advanced English learners should note powerful idioms here: consumed by guilt, overwhelmed entirely, like fire-devouring fuel, and frozen in shock, paralyzed by sudden trauma. Along with complex sentence structures using past perfect continuous. She had been unloading groceries when she heard the screams that would change everything. To narrate layered timelines effectively, skills vital for expressing regret or recounting personal crises in conversations, job interviews, or reflective writing. Modern Relevance connects deeply. In today's world of social media parenting pressures and rising awareness of domestic vulnerabilities post-2020 lockdowns, countless mothers face similar isolated grief, often compounded by economic strain or lack of support networks, teaching universal wisdom that self-forgiveness is not denial of responsibility, but recognition that humans are fallible and love persists beyond perfection. Ellie's guilt was not mere emotion. It was a heavy anchor preventing function, barely allowing her to arrange the funeral where her ex-husband Orland stood civilly supportive, their divorce 2 years prior having been relatively amicable for Lena's sake. Philosophical depth emerges in how grief fractures identity. Ellie questioned her worth as a mother, echoing existentialist thinkers like Viktor Frankl who, surviving Nazi camps, taught that meaning can be found even in suffering by choosing attitude amid unchangeable pain. As the priest concluded prayers and mourners offered hollow comforts, "She's with the angels now. Time heals." Ellie felt detached, watching her life from afar, the thud of the closing casket sealing not just Lena, but part of herself. Her sister Margot, a photographer with a camera around her neck, provided the only steady rock, embracing her with whispers of "I'm here every step," though their occasional disagreements over Orland lingered unspoken. This chapter of flames and guilt reveals that tragedy tests the soul's resilience, forcing confrontation with perceived failures while inviting growth through radical acceptance. When have you carried the crushing weight of "if only" after a loss you believed was your fault? And how might embracing advanced English tools for articulating regret, such as conditional perfect tenses, "if I had checked the extinguisher, perhaps," help you process pain and eventually release it toward healing and renewed purpose? Service concluded and mourners filed out into the golden, magic hour, sunlight bathing the parking lot. Margot reviewed her camera's images of the Victorian funeral home against amber maple leaves just beginning their fall turn, a poignant backdrop mirroring the season of endings, when an accidental swipe revealed a chilling detail that would unravel everything. Behind a grief-stricken Ellie at Lena's coffin stood ex-husband Orland, his lips curled not in sorrow but in a cold, almost triumphant smirk, eyes fixed on the back of Ellie's head with an expression devoid of appropriate solemnity amid the room's collective mourning. Margot's brow furrowed at the discordance, her photographer's eye trained to capture raw truth, immediately spotting what others might dismiss as a transitional facial expression or unfortunate camera timing, yet this was deliberate, menacing, out of place for a grieving father at his 2-year-old daughter's service. Historical elements ground this unease in real patterns of domestic abuse and coercive control documented since the 1970s battered women's movement, when activists like Lenore Walker formalized battered woman syndrome, and courts began recognizing that abusers often maintain facades of civility post-separation while harboring possessive rage, echoing high-profile cases from the 1990s. 2020s, where hidden smiles or inappropriate demeanor at memorials later revealed deeper psychopathy or involvement in the very tragedies mourned. Vivid character moments unfold as Margot insisted Ellie examine the photo in the silver Volvo, their argument escalating with old wounds reopening, Margot warning of Orland's history of control during the marriage, Ellie defending his civil post-divorce behavior for Lena's sake, accusing her sister of never giving him a chance, until irritation flared and Ellie demanded the car stop, stepping out in the funeral complex parking lot despite Margot's pleas. Emotionally, Ellie's development shifted from raw maternal grief to defensive denial, her exhaustion making her lash out at the one person offering protection, while Margot's persistence stemmed from sisterly love forged through shared childhood and post-divorce support. Philosophically, the photograph embodies the universal wisdom of the banality of evil, as Hannah Arendt described in her 1963 reporting on Adolf Eichmann, how ordinary or charming facades mask profound moral corruption, relevant today amid rising awareness of covert narcissism and gaslighting in relationships, where abusers weaponize shared history and grief to regain power. Advanced English vocabulary shines here. Discordance, lack of harmony or agreement, from musical roots, explaining emotional mismatch, the idiom out of place, inappropriate for the situation, and reported speech structures. Margot said that the smile looked menacing, but Ellie insisted it was just a coincidence. To practice conveying suspicion without direct accusation, essential skills for navigating difficult conversations, workplace conflicts, or personal boundaries in English. Modern relevance ties to 2020's digital forensics and bystander intervention training, where photos or videos increasingly expose hidden behaviors in abuse cases, as seen in movements like #MeToo that empowered survivors to question normalized red flags. Ellie, drained and prideful, accepted Orland's offer to stay at his modern gated community home instead of Margot's, sliding into a sleek black Mercedes where classical Bach music filled the silence, his cologne triggering memories of their marriage, while she stared out at upscale neighborhoods contrasting her destroyed suburban home with its crayon drawings and vegetable garden. At his minimalist glass and steel bachelor pad, Orland showed her to the guest room with fresh towels, then prepared lunch and spiced apple tea claimed to calm nerves, subtly intrusive by moving her ringing phone, multiple calls from Margot, without permission while she napped briefly. When confronted about the photo, Orland dismissed it defensively as a reassuring or nervous smile, claiming people react differently to stress, his tone hardening when Ellie pressed that he became quiet under pressure, not smiling, revealing cracks in his composed facade. Philosophical teaching deepens. Grief makes us vulnerable to manipulation, yet intuition, that skin-crawling feeling, serves as an inner compass, echoing ancient Greek notions of phronesis, practical wisdom, and modern psychological research on gut feelings as rapid threat detection evolved from survival needs. Ellie's hesitation to fully accept the photo's implications reflected emotional development from shock to tentative doubt, her self-blame still dominating as she replayed the fire, blaming outdated safety equipment and her momentary freeze. This chapter of unsettling smiles cracks the illusion of civility, teaching that true character emerges in unguarded moments and that questioning discomfort is the first step toward safety. Have you ever dismissed an uneasy feeling or off expression in someone close during a vulnerable time, only to later realize it revealed a deeper truth? And how can practicing English phrases for expressing suspicion, something about that felt off because, empower you to trust your instincts and protect your peace in relationships? Awoke in the sterile hospital room to disinfectant smells and beeping monitors, her bandaged leg throbbing as memories flooded back. Orland's confession, the knife, Margot's blood, police tackling him, prompting panicked questions about her sister, only for the nurse and Dr. Patel to deliver the devastating news that Margot had succumbed to multiple stab wounds and sepsis despite efforts, leaving Ellie curled in fresh agony, rocking as if to hold herself together after losing both daughter and sister to the same man. Historical context includes evolving trauma care since the 1970s development of PTSD recognition in Vietnam veterans and domestic abuse survivors, with 2020's advancements in forensic psychology aiding investigations into arson homicides, as seen in real cases where survivor testimony combined with digital evidence, photos, secured convictions under expanded domestic violence statutes. Vivid emotional development shows Ellie moving from numb despair to hardened resolve during discharge, accepting hospital-provided clothes and a cane, coordinating with Detective Collins for transport while arranging joint cremation and service for Lena and Margot at the same funeral home, her voice steady despite pain as she insisted on viewing both bodies for proper goodbyes. Lena in pink, Margot in blue, whispering promises of justice. Philosophically, this embodies resilience as post-traumatic growth per psychologists like Richard Tedeschi, where suffering forges meaning through honoring the lost, echoing ancient rituals from Greek mourning practices to modern memorials that transform grief into legacy. Advanced English focuses on formal register for legal/medical contexts. The victim sustained multiple lacerations resulting in fatal sepsis, and reflective vocabulary like resolve, firm determination, and idiom pick up the pieces, rebuild after devastation, enabling survivors to articulate experiences powerfully in statements or support groups. Modern Relevance addresses 2020's mental health crises post-isolation, where grief compounds with financial ruin, destroyed home, insurance delays, yet community support, flowers from police, hospital aid, illustrates collective healing. At the joint service, Ellie spoke truthfully about the murders by her ex-husband, honoring Lena's joy and Margot's loyalty while vowing justice, her cane-supported stance symbolizing strength amid vulnerability. Reception offered condolences as she planned next steps, hotel stay, insurance claims, DA meeting. Detective Collins provided steady aid, confirming charges against Orland for murder, assault, and impending arson/homicide additions, with drug evidence suggesting methamphetamine influence exacerbating his paranoia. Ellie's philosophical growth crystallized in recognizing she was not at fault for the fire, releasing self-blame to focus outward on survival and advocacy. This chapter of Aftermath teaches that justice, though incomplete, restores agency. How has profound loss forced you to rebuild from fragments? And in what ways can sharing your story, through structured English narratives, using transitions like "despite the pain, I chose to," inspire others while aiding your own healing? Modest hotel room after the joint funeral. As twilight stars emerged, Ellie sat on the bed scrolling photos of Lena's sandcastles and Margot's sunsets, the three of them at the petting zoo, forging a quiet vow to remember, survive, and ensure their story honored rather than defined by violence, transforming unimaginable loss into a legacy of resilience that would prevent similar tragedies for others. Historical threads connect to survivor movements since the 1970s women's shelters and 1994 Violence Against Women Act, evolving into 2020's advocacy for arson awareness and custody safety reforms, where mothers like Ellie become voices against coercive control. Vivid final moments show her practical steps: insurance filings, job considerations as a teacher, physical therapy for her leg, interwoven with emotional release through tears and determination, no longer paralyzed by guilt, but empowered by truth. Philosophically, this culminates in Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, meaning derived from suffering by choosing response, turning personal hell into purpose through remembrance and justice-seeking, a universal wisdom that love and truth outlast evil. Advanced English mastery includes narrative closure with reflective idioms, rising from the ashes for rebirth after disaster, and complex structures for inspiration. Though I lost everything, I found strength in their memory, which teaches us that. Tools for motivational speaking, journaling, or supporting others. Modern Relevance speaks to 2026 audiences navigating grief amid climate disaster fires, domestic violence surges, and mental health apps, urging documentation of red flags and community resources. Ellie's journey, from self-blame to confrontation, violent survival to public truth-telling, models that no darkness is absolute. Light persists in remembrance. The story ends not in despair but quiet hope. She would live honoring Lena's curiosity and Margot's compassion, ensuring Orlan's life sentence served as warning while she rebuilt, perhaps advocating for fire safety and abuse awareness. This 5-chapter arc inspires that even when monsters wear familiar faces, courage unmasks them, and survivors write new chapters. What legacy of love or resilience will you choose to carry forward from your own pains? And how can weaving your experiences into compelling English stories, filled with vivid details, philosophical insight, and calls to growth, help heal you while lighting the way for others facing similar shadows?